Oh, great. Is that Ari? Hey, how are you? Okay.
Bill here, and I think there should be a bit Ron in here, but I have to go run it past him. So it's gonna be a little weird because you're the only one streaming in.
Oh, okay.
You won't be able to see them, but you can ask them questions, I guess. But you might be able to hear them.
The other candidates, you mean, the Ron and so forth?
Yeah, so let me
Okay.
figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Try to sort of figure this out as I go. Anyway.
Okay. Okay.
So you'll hear Ron.
Oh, really?
I mean, not, he's like, he's a moderator. Ron is. If you guys go on to see, you'll be able to hear.
Nice meeting you guys. Very nice to meet you. Nice to talk. What are?
Yeah, just go up there. You don't need to use the mic, but you'll see Stephen on here, okay?
Are we at one? What's it there? Yeah, say that, right? You want to sit next to your partner? Maybe we mix it up.
Okay, Steve, you're on. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. So if you want to start with moderating, correct?
No, Ron is.
Oh, Ron?
Bill is,
Very, it makes it even easier. Okay.
yeah.
So, Ron, can you just say hello to Stephen? So I make sure he hears you. Can you hear him?
You probably need this.
I can't quite hear Ron if he was just talking. I can hear you, Ari.
First of all, yep, you got it. It's on. That's.
Hello? Hear me now? No, he can't hear me. Okay. Hold on. Sorry about that. Just working on that. Okay. So, what we're gonna do, okay, Stephen, I'm having trouble with the audio. So, I'm just gonna have Ron run this here, And, what you can do is I'm gonna send you another link that you can see them live. So if they ask you a question, we'll have to bring you in over on this one. So I'm gonna send you another link. But we won't see your face. We're just gonna hear you.
I'm okay with, I think we're okay with this right now, don't you?
All right, so okay, so that's fine. I'll keep the questions if you want to do it that way. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
So go right ahead.
Yeah, but will the audience be able to hear us?
Yeah, you're being streamed like that.
But he can't hear us.
Right, hold on. That was what we're having. Okay, yeah, you guys are ready to go. I just have to run one thing first and then we'll start.
Living if you're already dead, it's not worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Follow it down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
Go ahead, Ron.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the gambling panel. This is the panel that you need to listen to because in the space there's a broad market of people who are interested in esports that have never experienced it other than the odds out there on the market. The panel today is called "Jumping the Hurdle: Legal Issues Specific to Gambling and Esports Gaming for Profit." I am your moderator. My name is Ron Segev. I'm a partner of Segev LLP. We are an interactive entertainment law firm specializing in all things interactive entertainment, including video gaming, esports, real money, gaming and betting, skill games, fantasy, contests, sweepstakes, you name it. I've got a great panel here that's going to guide us through some of the top issues that we need to consider. I'll introduce them by name, and then I'll go around and have them do their own intros. To my immediate left, we've got Mr. Bill Pascarell. He's a partner with Princeton Public Affairs Group. To his left is my partner, Marius Dominica. He's a gaming lawyer. And then online joining us is Mr. Stephen Light. He's a professor and Tribal Gaming Institute co-director at the University of North Dakota. And he's also a distinguished senior fellow in tribal gaming at UNLV. Those are titles. I think it's important that we all get everyone's background. So what I'd like to do is just get a few minutes of color from each of our panelists. Bill, let's start with you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ron. Good to be here. Thank you for moderating. Ari, what you and your brother have been and are continuing to do is very important, I think, for the future, not only of esports, but of gaming. The casino floor will not look like what it looks like today in the next 5 to 10 years. My name is Bill Pesco III. I'm a partner in Princeton Public Affairs Group, which is the largest state public affairs firm in the country. 35 years and continuing. Just real briefly, real quickly, but I think it's important for context. I want to thank everybody who's joined us today. I've been fortunate in life to stay one step of the curve in gaming. Betfair hired me 13 years ago to bring exchange wagering to America. We started in New Jersey, got that bill passed under Governor Christie 12 years ago. Then I was hired by Imega, which was 37 offshore gaming companies, which left the nation when Wire Act passed, and PokerStars, who hired me to bring online gaming to America. We got that done in New Jersey in 2013. And then the 10-year battle, Senator Coley's here, that we went through with Governor Chris Christie and a host of other very important players to bring and to PASPA and sort of beat the NFL in the ultimate court in the nation, the Supreme Court, with the repeal of PASPA on May 14th, 2018. And now I'm working on what I think is a new extraordinary offering. And you may say, well, what does that have to do with esports? You shall see. We're bringing fixed odds horse racing to America through an Australian company called BetMakers. New Jersey will again be the first state in the nation to launch it. The bill passed and was signed into law by Governor Murphy on August 4th. The regs are coming out this week. The licensing will go next week, and we'll take the first fixed odds horse bet in America, in New Jersey, in the next 30 days. So thank you for the opportunity to be heard. I'm really looking forward to the conversation, Rob.
Thank you. Maris, some background info about Lincoln's.
Thanks, Ron. So my name is Marius Adalnik. I'm a partner at Ron's firm. I'm an esports, video gaming, and technology lawyer. I've been a lawyer for about 10 years. I've been doing esports law for about 4 or 5 years. My running joke is that I'm one of 3 esports lawyers in Canada, but it's actually kind of true at this point. And aside from my esports practice, I'm also on the board of a few industry organizations, the Vancouver Esports Association. I run a blog on esports and gaming law. I do consult for various companies in the field.
Great, thanks, Maris. And Stephen, you got a really interesting background. Maybe you can share with us.
Great, I'm happy to. I'm really assuming that everyone can hear me okay, and I'm thrilled to be a part of this panel. Thanks so much to our event. I just also want to note, if you're seeing my gigantic eye track, it is actually a CBC founders event that was given to me, and my partner in crime, Catherine Rand, was on a couple of panels a couple of years ago, and so thanks to Ari and the team for recognizing that I believe this is the 5th year of the CBC, the 5th year of our involvement, if I have that correct. So our appreciation. I see Mike, I'm at the University of Minnesota. We are along with Catherine Rand. I have been co-founder and co-director of the Institute for Studying Private Gaming Law and Policy, which is the first university center dedicated to advancing understanding on tribal government. And along the way, as all of you know, a lot of these topics are intermixed. We're talking about tribal gaming and commercial gaming and charitable gaming. And so what I focus on is law, regulation, public policy around gambling at large. In the last few years, esports, as we all know, has been on the rise, and so evidently not just thinking about esports as an industry. That's why we into and Catherine and I have had a chance to do some publishing area, and I'm just thrilled to be here. So thanks also to Bill and Ron and Marius for the opportunity to come together.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So as mentioned, this is a panel on legal issues specific to gambling and esports gaming for profit. We're going to run through 3 high-level topics. One is what are the challenges and opportunities in working with gaming publishers? If you're in the real money gaming or RMG space, can the gambling industry make their own games? And we'll get into specifically what that means. And third, bringing together casinos and gaming with video gaming communities. But before we even jump in, I think it's important to understand why why are we even talking about this? And honestly, the reason we're talking about this is because the money involved is huge today, and it's just growing further every year. Estimates for esports betting handle in 2020 are $17 billion. It's only growing. If you look at one case study, there's a B2C company, Canadian company called Luckbox. They are a dedicated esports company. They reported a 54% growth during the pandemic. Their numbers upticked as soon as the English Premier League was canceled during the pandemic. The pandemic was great for esports generally, but really great for esports gaming and betting. Traditionally, there's three, the big three titles have seen the most action, CSGO, Dota 2, and League of Legends. But now we're seeing second tier games getting a lot of traction, in particular NBA 2K and FIFA. Those titles are really interesting because they're kind of a gateway for traditional sports fans into esports. And they understand the rules, they understand the game mechanic. Once they get comfortable betting on those esports titles, they start exploring further. So lots of opportunity moving forward. I'm going to jump into to the first question. Steve, if I can ask you to speak up, we are having some audio issues here. If you could speak forcefully, that might help us. But a question for you, before we dive into the endemic esports questions, it'd be great to get a high-level review of the legal issues related to gambling writ large and how we got the lawful sports betting today. Can you walk us through some of that?
I can, although maybe it makes sense to do a quick mic check. How's that level for you?
Yeah, I've got a thumbs up from some guys in the audience here, so let's go for it.
Okay, great. Well, I'm happy to start out, and those facts and figures that you provided are really significant. Obviously, already in today's Congress, we've been hearing about the growth and potential impact of esports. As we think about our topic for our panel, the legal backdrop for esports is esports wagering, and that's our interface with casino operations. And in turn, that the legal backdrop for esports wagering is legalized sports wagering writ large. So obviously, focusing on the United States, which is what I'll be doing in these, ever since the Supreme Court struck down PASPA in 2018, we all know that there's been a massive rush into the potential market on a state-by-state basis, and as well for tribes. And that rush into the market has created a great deal of knowns at this point, and a number of unknowns. And as one pundit put it a long time ago in a different context, there are also known unknowns and unknown unknowns that we're dealing with in this particular area. Really importantly, our backdrop is a patchwork on a state-by-state basis as the legalization of sports betting is occurring. That creates a patchwork of regulations as well. And in the United States, we have 29 states in which American tribes are offering tribal government gaming. Of those, about 24 are Class 3 gaming, which requires a tribal state compact, and Class 3 gaming encompasses licensed sports wagering. So, in addition to that, in this complex legal web, we have a couple of main federal laws, the Wire Act and the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, accompanying federal rules and federal agencies. That patchwork of state law regulation includes lots of state gambling control commissions and gambling control boards, as well as tribal commissions, and then tribal state compacts themselves. So, not to make our heads spin, but that's an important part of thinking about how legalized sports wagering is being implemented today. And therefore, I think, and I'm sure our panelists agree, it's essential to understanding how sports wagering might be not just a toehold, but a foothold, and be a tremendous ancillary market add for casino operations. I have more comments, of course, to add along the way, but if that's an appropriate backdrop, I'm happy to turn it back to the panel.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. I think, to synthesize what you're saying, we came over, we've suffered through a fair bit of hardship trying to get sports betting and casino regulated and legalized, destigmatized in the United States. Our firm has been in the industry for almost 16, maybe 18 years now. Canada's been online since 2004. Europe's been online for a couple of decades now. So absolutely thrilled to see the United States embrace it, bring American culture to the industry, innovation, media savvy, and so exciting times. But yeah, and of course, if you're in the esports space and you're interested in the gaming opportunity, then you need to be mindful of gaming legislation, what's taken us to here and where we're going forward. That segues into my question for Bill. So if you're a game publisher, what is some of the legislation coming down the pipe that you need to be aware of if you're interested in the RNG, the real money gaming opportunity?
Well, there's a couple of things. First and foremost, I direct everyone's attention to legislation, which is going to pop in New Jersey, going to land up, and Governor Murphy will sign it. I think it's very critical for publishers to realize that this is a whole new space, gambling. I really was amazed at a Cantor Gaming study 10 years ago that 76% of Americans think sports betting is not gambling. It's astonishing. America, and this is not, this is very different from Canada. America is way behind the times. We're in a nascent industry for online gaming. We're in a nascent industry for exchange wagering. We're in a nascent industry for sports betting, both online and retail for the most part, other than Nevada. New Jersey's already tripled ahead of Nevada in less than 2 years, doing mammoth GGR numbers, and Vegas has been taking bets on sports since 1950. I really believe it's important that we learn a valuable lesson from what U.S. companies have done. And our continuing to do is be nimble, be innovative, and understand market share. That's DraftKings and FanDuel. What they did with DFS is remarkable. Had they not, in 2015, exploded on every Sunday football game with massive media advertising, they probably wouldn't have been shut down anyway so quickly. But, they took that risk. I feel strongly about this, and the gentleman to my left is a phenom in legal issues surrounding esports. I am an attorney, but I do not profess to be an esport expert yet, although I represent multiple companies. I think this must have three pieces to the puzzle for any publisher to want to get engaged and involved. A, let's make sure it's continued to be viewed as a skill. B, let's make sure that the participants are at least 18 years old. And I also think that the casino industry, brick and mortar, needs to embrace this industry quicker than it embraced online. Because I think in a year or 2 or 3 from now, an event like this will have monster attendance. Obviously, COVID doesn't help. And there's massive money to be made in this industry. When I walk through the gaming floor at G2E the last few days, and when I do it in Atlantic City or Mississippi or wherever the heck life's taking me these days, I know that gaming floor is going to look very different than it looks today. 20 and 30-year-olds are not playing craps. 20 and 30-year-olds are not betting on horses. 20 and 30-year-olds are not buying lottery tickets up or Vegas, they're buying them online. And so the casino industry is starting to get beyond that. The AGA for years was against online gaming. The AGA still does not embrace esports. I was just talking to 2 professors from Miami. And they asked me whether G2E has any esports fans. 0, none. None. To me, that's denial. But, what the Fox team is doing here is important to this industry. And I think many people will be thanking them in years to come. Because I think there's incredible money to be made. You see what DraftKings doing, what they're offering on esports. And what I've noticed, Ron, and I'll conclude with this, Professor White, what I've noticed in the last I think we're going to be rapidly, Jersey can do it Q1 next year.
Yeah, I appreciate that closing thought, or question, where regulators are very close to the idea of esports betting. That's a nice segue into a question for Maris. So Maris, I know you obviously work together, so I know you advise esports gaming platforms as well as publishers. And so what are some of the legal issues these stakeholders need to keep in mind when building out a real money gaming esports product or service? Using Bill's closing thoughts there as maybe the seed of the first idea around that, some of the sensitivities that regulators may have. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I basically really want to piggyback on what Bill has said. So, in particular, the legal issues surrounding it are not that different. If you're going to offer straightforward betting on esports betting, just on single events, stuff like that, it's not that different. The issue is more enforcement and sort of customer service issues, especially age verification. The fact that a lot of these games are kind of marketing towards kids, like Fortnite, for example. Like that's a very large part of the audience is kids. Very graphics are very cartoony. You want to make sure that when you're advertising your product, if you use graphics from Fortnite, for example, a lot of people who don't understand the space may think like, "What are you doing? Like, are you marketing towards kids? Is this an issue?" And I think a lot of it sort of comes down to enforcement more than what the actual law says. I mean, I'm a Canadian lawyer, so speaking for respect to Canadian gaming law, but way the law is drafted, like if you stare hard enough at it, like anything's illegal. Like insurance contracts are potentially illegal gambling in Canada in theory. But really the issue is, are regulators going to take a look at that, and are they going to have an issue with what you're doing? And that basically comes down to PR a lot of the time, especially in esports, because you have all these sort of novel approaches to betting that aren't really possible in traditional sports. So one example that's, I think, really kind of flying on the radar right now is these P2P betting sites where you can play a game of Madden against somebody else in North America, and you can put real money on that. That's not something you can do in traditional sports. Obviously, you can't really set up, competitive basketball tournaments where people can bet and play themselves. Not scalable, anything of that, but with esports or video gaming, but gaming with technology is there to do that. And right now, all these sites are operating as skill gaming. Again, don't want to get into the technicalities of what they're doing is skill gaming or not. It more likely depends on each specific video game they're operating, and needs to be addressed individually. But really, they're kind of, in my view, as Bill alluded to, they're kind of in the same situation they are now that DraftKings and FanDuel were at like 8 or 10 years ago before we started running all those ads. They're running essentially on the radar. Regulators aren't paying attention. But if they start getting a bunch of bad PR, people who don't understand the space start seeing all these stories and getting scared about, oh my God, kids are using their dad's credit card and losing thousands of dollars or things of that nature. Regulators are going to turn around real quick, and the stuff that was legal, a month ago, mobile laws haven't changed. Suddenly, are going to start having problems. So I think really it's almost like more of a PR issue right now than legal issues of how to approach esports betting.
Yeah, that's obviously my experience too. In my work, is that a lot of regulators basically don't understand how tournaments work. They don't understand the game mechanic. And one of the first things that I hear are concerns around game integrity, cheating, the integrity of the technology. And I think it is an education piece. So you know, obviously I fully agree with that. I think there's also some concern around taking bets from some of the amateur platforms because it's very hard to calm those concerns down. You know, and there's so much gameplay on you know, Win.bet or Face It or some of the other platforms, and there's betting on those platforms. So I think if you're approaching the regulator, it's critical that you've got good partners on board that you can walk them through your technology and deal with those core game integrity and cheating concerns. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question or talking point here is, can the gambling industry make their own games? And this is an interesting question because the gambling industry has made their own games for 100 years. So why can't they just create their own esports game and their own esports ecosystem? You know, why do they have to rely on publishers? And so, Bill, I'll open the question to you. Why should or shouldn't a real money gaming company just make its own games, control the game IP, the league rules, the community? Is that where things might go, or do you think that's a bad idea?
I think it's a terrible idea. I feel strongly about it. And I think it's black and white. I think that the U.S. gambling industry has created very pedestrian games for gambling, very pedestrian. You want to get some vibrant games, you're going to content writers in Israel, in many of the Danish countries, the Netherlands, Australia, parts of Europe. It's not what they do. Now, could they spend a fortune and try to get writers to do that? Sure they can. Well, why not collaborate and take the power of gambling and marry it with the extraordinary innovative power of gaming winners? So that's number one. And number two, I really appreciate what has been said here. Well, what I've said to regulators when I've talked to them about this issue in the past 18 months, perhaps 2 years, is this is very similar to everything we're currently doing. People are betting on sites like Bovado and esports every day in America. And you're losing revenue, and jobs aren't being created in the country because of that. And I know the Canadian regulators appreciate that. I think the US regulators are somewhat appreciative of that, not there yet. The issue of age, to me, is silly. Everything we bet on, particularly online in America, has to have a house rule. All of the valid esports leagues have house rules. And age verification is a seminal part of online gaming. AML, geolocation, all that can be done. We bet on the game last night, and there were players in that game last night under 21 years old. So what? The best way to handle that is to legalize and regulate it, not to allow it to stay in the dark. If a gaming content writing company came to me and said, we want to write our own gaming publication, I would say to them, let me introduce you to a couple of people first, because you're going to be able to scale quicker and collaborate quicker and have a better product that I think will capture the imagination of consumers.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think telling is that in the traditional real money online slot world, a slot game typically there's some very sticky titles out there, but typically a slot game will have a 6-month lifespan. And if you look at League of Legends, it's a 50-year-old game, 100 million users. And I think the gambling community can learn a lot from the gaming community. So, Steve, a question to you. If we're all drinking from the same Kool-Aid here, that it's a terrible idea for gambling companies to just produce their own esports games, what's the opportunity for existing online gambling companies to work with publishers?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've been listening with interest to you, Ron, and to Bill and Marius, make that point before I address the real money gaming companies. Yesterday, I had a chance to sit in for just a little bit as part of my other role as a distinguished fellow with the International Center for Gaming Regulation at UNLV there, listening to U.S. gaming regulators at the state level in particular, and a number of their questions and concerns, not about esports per se or sports betting exclusively, involve issues of needing to bridge information from operators and vendors to regulators. And I think that's just a great theme. I don't have the solutions to it. But let's come to that question, back to that question. I would say that actually seeding, allowing for the idea that the real life gaming companies aren't where it's at in esports is actually totally okay, because esports game publishers have long had first mover advantage in this area, and all of the branding and marketing clout, and all of the name recognition, and now all of the vertical and horizontal stacks that create such a robust industry worldwide. So the real question overall, which includes real money gaming companies, is how to monetize esports opportunities. Publishing isn't the answer to that. So among the issues that regulators have been talking about overall are how to understand and harmonize online and mobile gaming environments with retail environments, which they're most comfortable with. How to harmonize understanding and implementation of online and mobile gaming regulation with esports and esports wagering is a logical extension of that. And so I'd say the opportunity is actually to lean into that, finding the ways to have technology interfaces that will help increase the fluidity and decrease friction in the online and mobile space generally, will only benefit the esports industry as well.
Great, thank you, Steve. Aaron, I know you've been working with some really interesting emerging esports companies. They're innovating new ways to marry esports and gambling. There's more than one way to marry the two industries. Can you walk us through some of what you've seen and any legal issues that we need to look out for?
Yeah, there's definitely there's a lot more sort of creativity I find in esports gambling, just because it's such a new industry and the technology allows you to do stuff that you potentially can't do with traditional sports. And also because the fact that it's not established means that it's a lot harder to come up with odds and lines than it is for traditional sports. NFL handicapping has been around for like 50 years, 100 years, and even there's still a few people that can beat the market for casino-generated lines. With esports, there's nobody who knows how to price this stuff really at this point, and it's almost a fool's errand if you are kind of an operator trying to set up an esports betting service to come up with your own odds. Especially because there's also so many games and the approach varies for different games. Games are always coming out, and expertise in one game doesn't translate into a new one. So it's a lot harder to come up with odds. So I've seen a bigger emphasis in sort of user-generated markets, like instead of the actual operator setting a line, they basically allow users to offer bets that are simply by having users in the market sort of create the lines. That's been a very sort of practical approach I find, and we've found a lot of clients who started out using this model and are using this information to learn to set lines themselves, and are now looking at trying to set their own lines based on this info and selling that information to casinos or operators. There's also a lot of sort of cool technological stuff you can do. So instead of just betting on the outcome of events, we have some clients who are experimenting with in-stream betting. So like if you're watching a stream or an event, you can bet like, oh, is this guy going to get the next kill, or what's going to happen like in the next few seconds. That's actually been in traditional sports. Like it's been like a very huge growth area for that, be in-game betting, like who's going to score the next goal, and there's a lot of that going on in esports as well. the core issue that I think arises out of all of this is integrity. So it's a really, the system is a lot more decentralized. You have these kind of P2P betting where users are setting odds for user markets. Since so much time in esports gets spent watching streams, I don't think we're that far away from, instead of having betting on individual like sanctioned competitions, where you can have in-stream betting on individual streamers, like what's going to happen next, that kind of thing. I don't think that's far away from that. And the more decentralized the system is, the more actors are there setting the odds. I think the more risk there is for sort of potentially problematic stuff to occur. How that's going to happen, I don't know. I mean, I think there is stuff like in the next few years that's going to surprise all of us. And we're going to say, oh, they did what? How are these people doing it? There's definitely issues that are going to arise. It's just tough to say at this point what it's going to be, just because space is evolving so quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's one of the reasons that our firm got involved with esports at a very early stage. Great thanks to Maris for that. I remember we had our first esports meeting, and I said, is there any money we made this? He said, no, not today, but let's sponsor some tournaments and buy some pizza. And we see amazing innovation come out of the community. Speaking of communities, we usually talk about two separate communities, the sort of the gambling gaming community and the esports community. And the next question is about the differences in the communities, possibilities for overlap. Bill, when talking about esports and gaming communities, what do we mean by community? What's the makeup? What's the demographic and psychographic makeup of the communities, and how does that evolve?
Well, certainly the demographics of esports are far younger than the demographics of your traditional gambler, and even in many instances, your online gambler. I think that America, like most everywhere else in the world, has a culture in gambling. A lot of America has been gambling on the street, particularly in sports betting. And they continue to gamble on the street because of credit, which is not permitted in the gambling regulated industry. I think that as esports continues to develop, I remember when I was watching Texas Hold'em on television 20 years ago, my father saying to me, what in God's name are you wasting your time looking at that for? And then it exploded. And about 10 years later, I remember talking to my two young boys, who are now in their late 20s, saying, what the heck are you watching people play video games? It's just, and here I am, just the direct opposite. So, guys like me are not going to be a phenom in the esports industry. It's a far younger crowd, but I think it's also a very discerning and demanding crowd. And I think, this is my observation, it's not empirical, I think the demographic group of gamers are far more loyal than the demographic group of gamblers, who will move in a minute for bonus bets and are not tied to a particular video offering in a slot or some type of sports betting app. And I think what's important is for the conference down the street to realize that the sooner they embrace this industry, the esports industry, the quicker they'll be able to mitigate what's going on in Macau now and hurting all their brains. And other items around the world which are going to have a deleterious impact on gambling. But I think later on we have a panel on RG, which I'll come back for. I also think that is a very important piece to bridging the gap between these two very distinct communities.
Thank you, Bill. Steve, a question for you, or a technical legal question. Well, you had said in our prep call prior to this panel that we have to have a conceive of these the communities in legal terms. And I really like that concept. Can you walk us through that and why that's important?
Sure, I'm not sure that it's, I appreciate the credit for actually making a profound point, but I'm not sure it's that profound, and I know our other panelists can comment on this as well, but basically I think what I was thinking about and we can be thinking about, should be thinking about is, we all know, and Bill was talking about this here as well, that the demographics for gamers and gamers aren't necessarily a perfect overlap. So on the esports side of gaming, that includes both legal and illegal betting. And a number of folks who are going to be potentially engaged or involved in esports are going to be significantly younger, are going to be minors. And so one luxury that I have as a outside the industry as an onlooker is I get to make observations from 60,000 people. What I'd say is that while we might be optimistic about opportunities to bring younger demographics into the traditional casino world and into opportunities for sports betting and esports betting, we need to be mindful of the fact that legally speaking, there's a very clear distinction in the United States between those who are of age to say set foot in the casino and those who aren't. And that finds its way into a lot of different dimensions that touch how regulators currently are and policymakers are thinking about esports and its potential. Because the face of esports is someone who is a minor, someone who is 14, 15 years old, someone who is, for most policymakers and regulators, their son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter. That's how they view those who are involved in esports. That image is a very powerful one. And so, in moving beyond thinking about how we're going to allow for esports and esports wagering to coexist, we need to bring regulators and policymakers along in understanding how safeguards and protections, age verification, and geolocation, all those kinds of tools can both allow for esports sports to flourish and protect minors. So I think it's Pollyannish, frankly, to not acknowledge that that's an issue, because that creates the opportunity to bring folks along.
Yeah, I think those are important points. I sort of speak to what I was saying earlier about needing to educate the regulators on the solutions available that mitigate those concerns. So, age verification is a huge one, but we've been doing age verification for 15, 20 years now. Maris, we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you, are these gaming and gambling communities overlapping now? Are there any sites or platforms that this blended community is visiting? Where are they spending their time? Any technology that's bridging the gap?
Yeah, so I think in terms of sort of marketing to an esports audience, it's a whole different ballgame than traditional gambling marketing. It's obviously a different demographic. It skews a lot younger. They're a lot more tech savvy. A lot more likely, for example, to use crypto to bet, that kind of thing. They're big on using platforms. So Twitch is obviously a big platform used, so that's not as much communication. Things like Twitter, Discord, all this kind of stuff where traditional gamblers aren't really involved in that. But if you want to reach this audience, you have to sort of know that this is where they hang out and know how to approach them on these platforms. I also think influencers, especially streamers, like their role is really sort of underrated at this point. I think people know, okay, yeah, they're kind of important, and that's kind of who people watch in this space. But I think people tend to underestimate the audience and the reach they have. They're really, if you're a brand and you want to reach a gaming audience, they're like first, second, third stop. You're a lot more likely to get sort of bang for your buck than you are for traditional ads on random gaming sites or stuff like that, or affiliate marketing. They're kind of the way to go, and it's just understanding the magnitude for influence is pretty important. And I think the last thing to keep in mind when sort of trying to connect with this audience is that they're very big on sort of authenticity. They don't like being pandered to. I guess no one really does. They don't like. It's really easy to sort of like step in it and sort of like. There's been a few instances where like even like famous ad agencies in New York, like Olivia, I think, like one of the biggest ad agencies in the world, they tried to do something with streamers, and it was very kind of inauthentic, and it didn't look right. The games the influencers were playing weren't even real games, and they just got completely roasted on Twitter and by the community. So it's important to be like respectful of the fact that like this is an existing community with so and so sort of social mores, and try to approach it with people who like already involved in it and understand it and approach it that way instead of sort of just from the top down and just dumping a whole bunch of money in an aspect about what you're thinking about how to do it there.
Great, sound advice. I think we're out of time. We may have a couple of minutes for Q&A.
Any questions?
Great panel, guys. Thank you. I'm Scott Barr with Hub International. My question that kept kind of popping up throughout the panel was, are you guys seeing, or do you think we'll see enough friction and barriers for these publishers and esports teams that eventually, like with the regulation side, that they eventually kind of not give up entirely, but are almost desensitized to the opportunities that the integration of, again, casino, like the traditional gaming world and video gaming world have? Or, do you see any of that where they just are not as incentivized or don't find the relationship mutually beneficial? I know early opportunities are for the casinos and these like sports books that would essentially host these opportunities for bets and things like that.
Yeah, I think sort of publishers are kind of sort of the elephant in the room in esports. They control everything. You can't do anything about their consent. Sort of how they approach this and how they interact with sort of gambling providers is going to be very important in the future. I think a lot of them, very huge public corporations, most of their money comes in from just selling games, and now more and more for the actual, maybe running their own leagues and stuff like that. And I think they want to be very careful about jeopardizing that. I think they're very PR sensitive. I know a lot of the standard player contracts for a few of the leagues, for the Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, actually have you have certain categories where you're not allowed to advertise with players without the league's consent. And I think gambling sites are one of those categories. So I think they want to be very careful about how they approach that, especially because there's also, we're not really getting a cut of a revenue. People are taking third-party bets by default. They're not involved. I mean, we're also going to have a tough time stopping people from doing it. But in terms of working with them and getting them to sort of sanction this stuff, I think it has to be done very carefully. I don't think they're flat out opposed to it, but they're also they're a lot more worried about protecting their brand and not stepping into sort of like a PR nightmare. And when they weigh the cost of that versus the potential benefits of working with a gaming provider, I think they just want to tread carefully what we're doing.
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts after that. I think we've already seen those types of concerns play through in traditional sports in the United States. So when we've got a traditional publisher that's coming to us to explore a real money opportunity, their primary concern is alienating their existing player base. So if the game skews really young, they're just not going to engage in that. If it skews older, age majority plus, they're interested, but that's not how they make money, right? That's not their model. And if they're approached for a licensing deal or whatever, again, they're concerned about alienating the community. The reason that real money gambling on esports is of interest to them is the same reason it's of interest to traditional sports leagues. Real money gambling encourages fandom, right? Engagement, viewership. And that's always, we've seen that to be the model in Europe. 5-6 years ago, if the NFL would have, entered into official partnerships with gambling companies, I would say, no way. They were absolutely against it. But they realized that it fuels engagement, and guess what? Their fans are already betting. So they might as well control the message in some way and try to make some money too. And I think we are going to see that for some publishers, for some titles, where they're not actually taking bets, but they're interfacing with the real money community because they know that it's going to fuel engagement and enthusiasm for the games.
Any other messages? Any other questions? Yes. Hold on 1 second. That's our last question.
Glenn Platt with Miami University. I want to ask a follow-up to this question. One pattern we've seen with game publishers is as they identify new opportunities, there's a lot of vertical integration that's gone on, right? They've expanded their businesses up and down in places that they hadn't been before. Do you see that continuing into the gaming space? So, in its most extreme form, right, Epic opens a casino, right? Now, that's not literally my question, but that's been their pattern historically. Do you see vertical integration as an inevitable thing, or people are going to stay in their lanes?
We've already seen some, merging into other lanes. I think if we see any movement in that regard, they're gonna go after the low-hanging, safe fruit. And by that I mean things like skill games, contests, sweepstakes, stuff that isn't, pure hardcore gambling. I think we're gonna start seeing some movement there, and frankly, we already are. Now, the other thing we need to keep in mind is that many publishers are already in the gambling business with loot boxes, right? We've got several European countries that have defined loot boxes to be gambling. It is a casino mechanic. It's addictive. It's the same way certain casino games are addictive. So have they merged into some lanes? Yeah, I'd say they have. Do we have some clients who are interested in the skill games opportunity? Yeah, absolutely, because it's not gambling. There's no regulatory layer, there's no compliance layer. They have to be dead certain that it's a skill game under law. And then we've got some other traditional publishers who are already doing sweepstakes and contests and stuff like that. And I think we're going to see that low-hanging fruit being picked by the publishers, and maybe if they get a bit savvier with the compliance piece, they see that it hasn't alienated the community, that it's still on brand, maybe Epic will open that casino. Yeah, I have to agree with you. They're always looking for opportunity.
Do you have one more response?
Yeah, just one very small thing, but I agree with all that. I think one just general thing I want to mention about publishers and integration and that is basically, I think over the next 20 years, publishers are going to have a look at themselves and kind of fundamentally reassess what their business is. I think they thought now, okay, we make video games, but really now we're turning more into media companies, really, and video games are a part of that. And how that's going to expand and where that's going to go, it includes gambling, but all sorts of different areas. It's, Reed Hastings, CEO of Netflix, he said, his competition for the next 20 years isn't movie studios, it's video games, gaming companies. That's what he's afraid of, essentially. That's kids these days spend their time watching. They don't watch TV anymore. They don't watch movies. They watch Twitch streamers and they play games. How that's going to affect them entertainment fundamentally, we're still in the early stages of that. And the power publishers have as the makers of those games, that's something that's really kind of unprecedented in entertainment before. How that's going to play out is really, I think, we're just scratching the surface.
I think this is the key takeaway for we should open with that. The future is the metaverse. That's it. And the metaverse is the reflection of the universe, right? And in a few years from now, it'll be the other way around. And the metaverse is going to include all kinds of social engagement, including gambling. And I think the publishers have the opportunity to own the metaverse. So they're mindful of that.
Well, I wanted to thank Segep Law Firm for coming down from Vancouver. That's right, Vancouver.
That's right.
Ron and Marius. And Stephen Light coming in from the University of North Dakota. We had some problems with the audio. I appreciate you attending the panel. But did you hear us okay? Okay, good. Great. So, we're going to resume again at 2 o'clock. At this time, there's some food, and we're going to bring out some lunch, some sandwiches. So help yourself to anything you would like. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, but I feel part less good. Just gotta scan every camera. What the dog like? Just see. Okay. Mobile makes more money than PC and console put together. So that's why I had a question for you. Watch. Well, I don't think you can. Like, there's like sort of real world applications that apply on top of NFTs. NFTs, and it's just like the ledger entry that says, I own Jack Dorsey's Twitter. Legally, that means nothing. Like, legally, I guess he owns it. He has copyright to it. So you can say, no, I own that tweet. But like you can say, well, I own that ledger. Sorry, I always, my brain messes up. But like, yeah, it's a question of like, what does your NFT actually mean? It really means nothing. reasoning you have is that certifies that you have the reason. The whole point of a blockchain is that you have that ledger that says this is yours. That's really the only value it provides. There's got to be some kind of understanding. I guess you need, like, in the case of art, you need an agreement with the artist. Basically, when issue an NFT saying you're not going to issue another NFT for this particular image. Something better. It's the weird issue of, like, where the real world and the technical aspects meet, sort of. And I don't think anyone would figure it out. Yeah, most of it.
Yeah, so, yeah, part of the question on that, the gaming is kind of wagering.
There's a lot of stuff about it.
Yeah, I'm sure that the politicians are trying to regulate as much as they can.
Should they always?
Yeah, I will, thanks.
I just had one quick question for you.
Sure, absolutely.
Do you think that the United States will adopt the view of the international community that the wager is placed where the server is at?
Oh, I don't know. That's like, I hope so, I guess, for the sake of US gambling industry, but whatever, I mostly do Canadian stuff. But yeah, my guess is that would really sort of shake some things up for the industry. I mean, so I think we're pretty far away from that. I don't think the government wants to sort of give up that power, because then everyone can just set up their servers offshore, and that's it. Then
Well, in our case, something we didn't try to do.
oh, you guys don't have a server.
Tribal regular. And the way the state of Colorado, their law is being interpreted that we can offer online sports, but we can do esports statewide. We've had our esports launch.
Scott. Good to meet you. Yeah, I mentioned, there's so much, was created in Vancouver, or in Canada, and so I'm in the US, and we have Canada, but, I just really want to get your inquiry, because again, I'm having a sports practice, I do a lot of sports management in general, insurance, procurement, risk management, but our Canadian offices, I don't think have like our sports management practice here and there.
definitely help with that stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you guys do? Because they're not just in esports, kind of broader.
Yeah, so we're a retail insurance agency. So, you know, for you guys, you have a law firm, we get to procure all of the various conditions insurance, so it's for malpractice, if you're an esports organization, we procure the entire insurance portfolio, and advise on, like, indemnity, contractual risk transfer, that kind of stuff. So both US and Canada. So any entity you can think of, regardless of whether it's sports or entertainment, we do a lot of that. So we're heavy in the cannabis space as well. So entities that need crop insurance or all that kind of stuff. So insurability of an organization. I again primarily esports, gaming, entertainment, sports, things like that.
And if you're already there, it's not worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Follow it down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
Entity, but again, it's the regulation is a huge component, so we know a little bit more being down here. But again, I'm sure they've asked some questions and maybe some needs to contact you guys. So I just wanted to see if I could.
For sure. So I'm not doing physical cards.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time I had a physical card, but
It's just a QR code. You just scan
Oh,
that
yeah,
over
right
and
on.
say my basically.
cool. Right on.
So shoot me an email, and yeah. Yeah, we also do cannabis, a lot of cannabis stuff too. So
Yeah, it's definitely a big industry, but a small world in the like professional advisory world because, you know, I know there's a lot of people in esports and gaming, but the people that actually like are on the advisory side, like advising the clients, it's pretty small world. We run into a lot of people that doing esports.
Living if you're already there, it's not worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head, believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Follow it down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
Side, which is great because that's the first, I think, the first key component. But some of these other firms that I've seen have no advisory, like advisory capacity on, you know, what these people are doing. Because most people in the insurance world are in their 50s, so they don't get the industry very well. But great to meet you. I appreciate it. I'll see you around. Thank you.
Marius, thank you.
yeah, thanks for having us.
Had trouble with the audio, so. But,
It's all good.
yeah, I mean, COVID.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know, it's not like, that's me and my brother. And we always have a problem with something. Lately, it's like COVID. You know, why is it like this? I said to my,
sick of it. Like,
yeah, I am.
just want to be
too.
done. But
Or somebody told me they couldn't make it today because they got vaccinated, like, you know, and, or somebody got vaccinated, I don't know, some guy got vaccinated, a friend of mine.
Yeah.
So he's like, I can't make it. I'm like, you know, it's like, because it's COVID, it's like, you wouldn't be surprised if he said something like, I'm pregnant from the vaccine. I mean, you just don't know what's going on anymore.
yeah, no, it's.
Everything's crazy.
I don't know, like, where to shake people's hands, or do we elbow, or
Yeah, you know.
where should bring cards, all this
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah. Yeah.
Well, help yourself to a sandwich.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, sorry about tomorrow. Like, so my mom developed an eye issue, and I had to go and help her.
Again, COVID.
Go. Cheers.
Yeah,
Go.
good. They're on the table. But which ones? You know what? I'm asking which ones? Both, each of one. Nobody's gonna eat it. Yeah, put it back in the fridge. Here, try this. Here, try this. How much this was? $10. There you go.
Yeah. So let's see. Right. See if it works. Try to play some video. Why'd you take these down? Too high? Was it too high?
Yeah.
That seems a little low. Yeah, so I can hear it. The video.
Living if you're already dead. It's not worth saying if it's already said. Even if it all goes over your head. Believe it if you want to. So keep your eyes on the road and your head in the stars. Find a way down the rabbit hole just a little while longer. You can change anything if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to. Sing it like ooh, if you want to.
You know what we really don't do? I have to go,